Hello again, and thank you for joining us. My name is Charlie Joyce, and I'm happy to welcome you to the Providence College Podcast. Once again, we are joined by our producer, Chris Judge, of the class of 2005. Our guest today is Dr. Patrick Kelly, professor of accountancy in the Providence College School of Business and director of the school's Ethics and Business Education program. Dr. Kelly has taught at Providence College since 2001. He's a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, where he also has taught. Dr. Kelly holds MBA and doctoral degrees in accounting from New York University and the University of Connecticut, respectively. His research interests include ethics education, casino gambling social costs, and other accounting issues that affect the public interest. Welcome to the Providence College Podcast, Pat.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
As you know, last May, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a 1992 decision that prohibited states from offering legalized sports betting. Rhode Island jumped on board quickly. We're actually one of just 7 states nationally, and I believe the only New England state that has legalized sports betting. A two-part question. Why have so few states bought into this at this point? And is there much posturing taking place among states nationally?
Well, I think there's two things going on. The states that have not bought in yet are still, that doesn't mean that they're looking at this issue closely. And I think for a number of states, they were willing to wait to see what the Supreme Court ruling was going to be. And so not anticipating how the Supreme Court was going to rule, that put some states maybe just kind of waiting to see what it would rule and then decide whether they wanted to go in this direction. But this is a really significant issue in terms of, the National Council on Problem Gambling called this the largest potential expansion of gambling in our nation's history. And so because we had one state that had legalized sports betting, now we could end up with all 50 states before it's over. And what was your second question?
Yes. Is there much posturing that's taking place among states currently?
Yeah. Yes, I think there is, in that to the extent, and I think we'll see it here in New England, both Connecticut and Massachusetts are going to look at the success or lack of success of sports gambling in Rhode Island. If it turns out to be very successful, then you can expect that both Connecticut and Massachusetts will start down that path as well.
Sure. A second casino site in Rhode Island recently began offering legalized sports betting, as you know. What's been the early assessment of activity at the Twin River sites in Lincoln and Tiverton?
Well, so far, and this usually happens when you have a new gambling venue, is it's very popular at the beginning of it. When, and I'll use it as an example, when Foxwoods Casino first opened back in 1992, they didn't even have an idea of what their operating hours were going to be. They said, well, we'll probably, shut down between, 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning every day. From the day they opened, they've never shut down. It's been a 24-hour operation because of such interest. And I think that's what we're seeing with sports gambling in Rhode Island. When Twin River started it, there's a significant amount of interest from people in Rhode Island and all over New England, Massachusetts, maybe a few from Connecticut. And they've even had to turn some people away, at least here initially, because they have not fully expanded to the operation that they're going to have within the next few weeks. So it's going to. They don't have any state revenue figures yet, but Rhode Island is taxing its sports betting at the highest rate in the country, over 50%. So it probably represents tens of millions of dollars to the state on an annual basis. But that remains to be seen, and probably in the next couple of months here, they'll start to report the revenue figures. Right.
Where are the sports betting patrons coming from, Pat? It must be more than just Rhode Island. And at this point, are the casinos attracting more customers because of legalized sports betting? My
guess is that they probably are. Twin River, the research has shown that about 50% of the patrons that go to Twin River come from Massachusetts. So since Massachusetts does not have sports gambling at this point, probably a lot of the folks who are coming to Twin River are coming from out of state. And so that's what and that's probably what they're hoping for, because if you have a casino, one of the things that you want to do is to attract residents, whether they're from your in-state residents or out-of-state residents, to come to your casino. And that's one of the things that's one of the dynamics that's existed ever since casinos have opened up in New England. And what's really happened now with casinos coming online up in Massachusetts is you've got states competing against states for casino patrons and the revenues that go along with those, and the casinos competing against casinos. And so you've got this dynamic where this is going to continue to play out over the next few years as casinos get further developed in Massachusetts and then potentially even increase in other areas of New England.
Right now, sports betting in Rhode Island is restricted to two areas, primarily the major professional sports, Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, and the NBA, and of course to NCAA college football and basketball. Is that menu likely to expand in the future?
I hope not. I think that, and particularly, I'm happy that they did not include college basketball, for example, in that under that umbrella. And I think that the interest where I'm never going to predict what sports bettors would like to do, but I think the interest that they're going to have, at least in the initial phases here, are going to be in the sports that you've just listed.
Right. And when you say that they didn't include college basketball, you mean Rhode Island college teams. In other words,
yes.
Patrons can't bet on Rhode Island colleges.
Yes. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah,
got you. As you referred to earlier, state revenue seems to be a real compelling argument for legalized sports betting. It's estimated that revenue in Rhode Island between the end of November, when sports betting began, and next June 30th, will be in the range of $11 to $12 million. Is sports betting a deal maker for the state? And what other appeal does the industry have from the state's perspective, Pat?
Well, I think it's potentially going to, and I think to answer that question, I think you have to long-term look and see what happens in the other states, as I've kind of mentioned before. If Rhode Island is the only state in New England that ends up with sports betting, they're probably going to recognize additional revenues that they would not recognize if other states end up getting into the sports gambling business. And so if they end up as that sole state, because they are taxing it at a high rate, I think that's going to be potentially more lucrative for the state of Rhode Island. The concern that I have is as you increase gambling opportunities and you increase gambling participation, you can also expect to see increased gambling problems from the folks that are engaged in gambling. And I think that's the National Council on Problem Gambling, their position is that states that benefit from sports betting and other gambling opportunities should act to minimize the problem gambling harm that can come to the folks that are engaged in those gambling activities. That's my concern for whatever happens in Rhode Island and whatever happens in other areas in New England.
And I would think that this concern would only be exacerbated if Rhode Island, and I know discussions are underway, happens to expand legalized sports gambling to the online platform. How do you feel about that? Is the state moving too fast here?
I think the state needs to be very cautious about going to an online approach to sports betting. Right now, you've got, and back to the social costs, right now, Rhode Island does not fund prevention and treatment programs for gambling at a very high level. And so to the extent that if they're going to go to an online sort of situation, you can expect to have more problem gambling issues. And so I think it's really important that if Rhode Island decides to go down this path, they step up and support problem gambling prevention and treatment programs at a much higher level. I'm also concerned if you start to go down the online road, I'm very concerned about young people. Young people right now, many times, youngsters are more tech savvy than even their parents. And so how are state officials going to prevent problems associated with a youngster maybe getting a hold of his parents' cell phone and deciding to play some bets? And so I think I think they should proceed in a very measured way before they just rush down and decide to go to online sports betting.
That's a good point you make, Pat, in terms of the youthfulness of some of the bettors. Is there any evidence in the early month or so here in Rhode Island in terms of the age groupings that have been utilizing legalized sports gambling?
No, I think it's too early to tell, and I think you're going to over time there'll be a profile that will develop. I think though just from looking at some of the FanDuel, et cetera, millennials tend to be interested in sports betting. So, but I know that there's folks in other generations that are also interested in it. So I think what I'd like to do is wait a little bit and see what the data suggests.
Let's stick for a minute or two with the issue of problem gambling. I know it's a research specialty of yours, Pat. How prevalent an issue is this locally and nationally? And for our listeners' sake, what are some of the maybe characteristics associated with this type of behavior?
Well, nationally, it's over 5 million people. The latest estimate from the National Council on Problem Gambling was approximately 5.5 million problem gamblers in the United States, and that includes about 18,600 in Rhode Island, another 31,000 in Connecticut, another 88,000 in Massachusetts. So, and what it has to do with, in many cases, is what are the gambling opportunities in the locations where people reside. And so, basically, and where I started doing this work was about 10 years ago. I noticed instances where problem gamblers were embezzling funds from their workplace and using those funds to gamble at casinos in Connecticut. So being an accounting professor, I was focused on, all right, how can we help prevent some of these embezzlements from occurring? And so I started doing some research and wrote a paper on casino gambling and workplace fraud with one of my colleagues, Carol Hartley from the accountancy department. And since then, I've studied about 30 cases where individuals did steal from their workplace and end up getting in a problem gambling situation and spending, large sums of money at casinos. And every one of those instances represents a tragic story. And so that's why I think it's really important to properly support problem gambling prevention and treatment programs to hopefully prevent these tragedies that are inevitably going to occur if people end up in a problem gambling situation. To quote the tax collector from one of the local towns in southeastern Connecticut, who had stolen over $300,000 over a 4-year period, her position was if somebody has a gambling problem and has access to cash, they're going to steal it. And so to the extent that we can help address that situation, I think that's a very positive thing if you're going to have increased gambling opportunities in your particular state.
Okay. Switching now to the college environment, Pat, has the issue of gambling and what's happening in Rhode Island with respect to legalized sports betting come up much in your classes? Not
very much in my classes, although to the extent that people students will start to see me on doing interviews on this issue, and to the extent that I can make them aware of the potential problems associated with problem gambling, I think that's a good thing, because I think it is something that frequently, nobody's ever walked into a casino saying, okay, I'm going to end up in a situation where I'm a problem gambler. But to the extent that different decisions that are made end up landing them in that category, like I said before, to the extent that we can prevent that through a variety of education approaches, I think that's a great thing.
Sure. Pat, are there any states or models of examples of circumstances where problem gamblers are getting assistance?
Actually, I think I'm very impressed with what Massachusetts has done as they've started instituting casinos. What they did is they gave through the organization that controls gambling in Massachusetts, the state organization, they've ended up with an affiliation with the University of Massachusetts, where they've actually even gone out and done some measuring beforehand, before the casinos have opened. So they've got a baseline of how many potential problem gamblers are in Massachusetts before the casinos have opened. Then they've got a very proactive way to address folks who may end up in a problem gambling situation inside their facilities, which I also think is a great thing, to the extent that people can self-identify and seek the help that they need. I think that's very good. And then they're going to have opportunities for people to get help in terms of treatment programs, which I think across the country that needs some additional work. But to the extent that Massachusetts is being proactive in that area, I think that's a great thing as well. The other thing that's impressed me about Massachusetts, even as they've brought casinos online, is they went to their citizens and they identified they were going to have a limited number of casinos. It was going to be 3 casinos and a slots parlor. But the folks who were going to potentially have a casino in their town were able to vote on whether they wanted the casino or not. And I think that's a really positive aspect as well. And the casinos that were going to land in the different municipalities ended up working out an arrangement where they were going to compensate the host communities where the casinos were going to be located. And so I think that's a positive aspect as well. I think Massachusetts has done a lot right in terms of bringing its casinos online. My sense is if they were to go down the sports betting path, they would take similar actions. And I think Rhode Island could learn some things from Massachusetts in terms of proper support of problem gambling prevention and treatment programs.
Another area of expertise, Pat, for you is ethics education, which obviously seems very aligned with our conversation today. What does ethics education translate to in the curriculum and for our students here at PC?
Well, we've got a tremendous opportunity to address ethical issues and ethical challenges with our students through our curriculum. I think it starts with the development of Western Civilization program that all of our students participate in. And I think if we can build on some of the knowledge and what they learn in the development of Western Civ program, that can really help us develop our students, because some of the most significant challenges that our students are going to face during their careers, and I'm an accounting professor, it's not going to be that technical accounting standard and can they figure out the accounting piece of this. It's going to be, can I make the right ethical decision when it's presented to me? And unfortunately, and I'll use the accounting profession as an example, there have been folks that have not met the challenge in terms of behaving ethically when they've been called upon to do so. So I think we can prepare our students to successfully meet those challenges, and it's wonderful work that, building on the development of Western Civ program, we have ethics in our core business curriculum. We have ethics addressed in just about every one of our core business classes. And so that's been, in terms of every student, that's a real positive development, I think, for the students at Providence College. The other pieces of this, which I'm also excited about, is since our ethics and business education program has supported student co-curricular activities, including case competitions that we've sent students to around the country, and case competitions that we've had in-house at Providence College. And for the last 2 years, we've had in-house case competitions, which have been great and very well received by the students. And this spring, we're about to extend that and have a regional case competition where we will invite some schools from the New England area to Providence College for a day where they will compete in an ethics competition, which I think is also great.
That's excellent. How did the ethics and business education program actually get started? And can you talk a little bit about the support for it from within? Yes.
Well, first of all, Dean Sylvia Maxfield has just been a tremendous support for this program. She had, in terms of going out and raising funds, Michael Smith had given a sizable donation to support this program, and so she was asked me if I was interested in coordinating it. And what's nice about it is it's not only inside the business school. So, for example, the associate director of the program is Terry McGoldrick, who's a theology professor. And it's really our intention to have this program reach across the campus. And what we've seen so far for example, in our in-house case competitions, is students from across the campus, not just business students, who have decided to participate in the case competition, along with faculty advisors from across from both the business school, but across the campus, from our liberal arts program, who have mentored student groups. And then outside the campus, even alumni members have been tremendously supportive, who have come in and in these case competitions served as judges. And the feedback that they've provided to us has been very positive as well.
Pat, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being our guest today and offering your expertise on a real hot topic in Rhode Island and really regionally, as well as sharing information about the Ethics and Business Education program. We're truly gratified.
Thanks for having me, and go Friars.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us today on the Providence College Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast in all the usual places, including iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and our newest platform, Spotify. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. We also welcome feedback at podcast@providence.edu. Thanks again to our producer, Chris Judge. I'm Charlie Joyce. Until next time.